June 4th, and this is the Energy and Environment Committee. And we will begin with item 1, awaiting Mr. Labange and Mr. Koretz, and Mr. Blumenfield, I know, is not going to be able to make it. So, Mr. Clerk, it looks like we have, Mr. CLA, it looks like we have a quorum.
Yes.
Item number 1.
Okay. Item number 1. Motion Fuentes West and relative to request in the Department of Water and Power in conjunction with the Bureau of Sanitation and Office of Public Accountability to prepare comments in connection with the draft Bay Delta Conservation Plan and associated environmental reports.
All righty, so that's item number 1. Wendy, you're looking at me and saying number 4. What?
Oh, I'm sorry, sir.
Yeah, so we want, I wanted number 1.
Number 1? So,
yeah.
So that relates to item number 1. And we have staff here in the event you'd like to hear comments from.
Come on up. It looks like we're...
Yeah.
Christine, can you find out what Wendy wants? All right, so we're taking up item number 1. If it's okay with everybody, we'll go ahead and take items 4 through 7 on consent unless there's an objection.
Hold on a second.
4 through 7?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Okay with you, Mr. Weiser? Mr. Kretz, 4 through 7, okay?
I actually have a couple comments on 6, so if we could hold that.
Comments, no questions on 6, so we'll go ahead and take 4, 5, and 7 on consent. That will be the order. Item number 1, before we ask the staff to testify to item number 1, I did want to make a sort of a short informational point. I introduced a motion in April asking the Department of Water and Power to prepare comments relative to the Bay Delta Conservation Plan and the associated draft environmental impact report and the environmental impact statement. I think it goes without saying that Los Angeles needs to participate in the process, and we need to lodge our comments with all of that. But since then, on Friday of last week, we were informed that state and federal agencies released a draft implementing agreement for the Bay Delta Conservation Plan for public review, and also extended the comment period for all BDCP related, well, for the implementation plan for the BDCP and the related environmental report. So that increases the scope, I think, of the comments that we need to consider. So in order for us, I think, to proceed, understanding that we've got a little bit more time, it's my hope that staff will be able to give us a verbal report of the work that they've done thus far, come back to committee with a complete report, written report, and what we'll do today to hopefully inform all of the work that you're preparing is take public comment on all of it. So this way we can structure the conversation. And then at some point we'll have a conversation on whether we should support or not support BDCP. So the idea is that we go ahead and have a verbal report today on the work that we had asked you to do, but we're going to have to expand the scope of our comments, and we'll bring that all forward to the next committee hearing. So with that, DWP, if you could go ahead and tell us what you know so far.
Yes, thank you. Marty Adams, Deputy Senior Assistant General Manager for the water system. So we're here to give you a brief update on the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, which is also known as the BDCP. And as you mentioned last Friday, the state extended the public period by another 60 days. So that gives us until July 29th to submit any comments to the draft EIR, EIS. And at the same time last Friday, they released a draft implementing agreement. And this is also has the same public comment due date. The implementing agreement is a key piece of the whole package because it's ideally supposed to provide a framework for how the project would come to be, how the responsibilities and commitments of the various parties would take place, particularly in terms of financing the project. And so that was a piece that we had not seen until Friday. It's about a 100-page document, and that'll be a key thing to also comment on because it'll relate to how the project would be funded and any input we have as far as that goes. We are currently reviewing the draft agreement from last Friday as well as the EIR. We were hoping to take into account any public comments that were raised today in both regards to the BDCP and the city's overall water plans and our plans for the future water supply for the city of Los Angeles. And we will provide written responses in 2 weeks at the next meeting to both your motion and the one by Councilmember Koretz. Yours was pertaining particularly to preparing comments for the BDCP. Councilmember Koretz, yours was particularly about the cost impact to ratepayers and cost-benefit analysis. And we are doing that currently, both cost benefits of the project itself and then weighing also cost benefits of other associated local supply projects that are part of our portfolio or maybe part of things that might happen down the road in LA, such as like the cost of desal, some of the farther kind of higher hanging fruit on the tree, and kind of how these things compare. We do know that the planned infrastructure investments, we have massive investments planned for local water supply, both for development of supply and the infrastructure associated with that. And we need to look at the continued viability of the state water project as well as protection of the Delta ecosystem so that we can make sure that we have assured adequate and reliable water supply for the city. And we view these things as going hand in hand, that the BDCP is not the end-all be-all, that it's part of a plan both for the state and for the city of Los Angeles, that we will be able to meet our water supply demands in the future by both increasing our local supplies here through the number of projects we have and then being able to backstop that supply with a reliable supply from the state so that in good years and bad years we have a variety of water supplies that we can draw upon as we do currently. So we look forward to responding back in 2 weeks with the detailed report. We will analyze our whole water supply portfolio that we have planned, the local resource development plans that we're working closely with our partners from Bureau of Sanitation, so we can look at how we'll make the most of that and properly fund those. And then within that context, the role that the BDCP plays as part of the future portfolio, where we ideally anticipate reducing our demands on Delta by half, as we've already reduced our demands on the LA Aqueduct by about half, but where this project would play into making sure that that supply that we need, particularly in bad years, is available and reliable to the city, and both then and done in a cost-effective way that we can afford to do all these projects and meet the goals for the future. Adele, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Good afternoon, Adele Hashkhalil, Assistant General Manager, Bureau of Sanitation. I want to echo what Marty said, is we're working together closely on addressing this issue. It's a very important issue for Los Angeles. As you know, working together also on looking for the future of Los Angeles and developing a one water plan for the future. Water conservation reuse at the local level in Southern California and Los Angeles should be an integral part of the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, and we should make sure it's integrated as part of it. There's too many variables, but we think there needs to be an investment similar to what's being done with the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, or part of it, that provides more generation and use of local water supply, especially for us, stormwater capture and reuse, addressing the water quality, but also water quality and groundwater recharge and stormwater harvesting. By integrating local water supply into the Bay Delta, I think that will be a win-win. It will minimize impact by reducing demand on the Bay Delta, but also enhance restoration of the Bay Delta, but then increase reliability and sustainability of water supply here while improving water quality and water supply. I think investing in local water here, especially stormwater capture and reuse and recycled water, will help provide California, Southern California and Los Angeles economic opportunity to revitalize and get more jobs here locally also. So I know we've been talking a lot about our future need for addressing water quality and stormwater, and the opportunity for capturing stormwater in a smart way that we can replenish our water supply, but also provide a green and healthy community. This partnership is working very well with our partners in Water and Power. I think we are working on addressing these issues, but I think making sure that our area continues to be sustainable and resilient and reliable while addressing our local needs also.
Ratepayer Advocate.
Fred Pickle, Office of Public Accountability, Ratepayer Advocate. At your request in February, we have prepared a report on the ratepayer impacts of the BDCP based on information available up through early May. And that includes not a cost-benefit analysis. It cites the major cost-benefit analysis studies as the first, the middle, and the last reference in the attached references. And that's in Council File 140121. And we're reviewing it in response to the comments we've already received and to comments we may hear here.
Very good. Colleagues, any questions for staff? Again, how we're going to proceed is we're going to take public comment today because things changed on Friday. We were tasked to now comment on the implementation part of this as well as everything that we had prepared. So as a result, now, Mr. Koretz, we're going to have a conversation of cost and the environmental sort of engineering aspect of it. So it's as if they were sort of feeling the energy here, Mr. Koretz, because now I think the next meeting we'll go ahead and sort of talk about it in its totality and then ideally move the comments to the state. So I don't know if my colleagues have any questions for staff while they're here. Mr. Koretz.
A few questions for the ratepayer advocate. Obviously, you didn't read the 40,000-page document yourself, and for the record, neither did I, so I'm not claiming that. Where did you get the bulk of your information on the document and for the analysis?
One, there was the Bay Delta Conservation Plan report, which we reviewed. I don't think we've turned every page on it, but we reviewed key portions of it. In addition, there was a report by the PFM group on economic benefits and financing strategies. And lastly, a report by Chris Thornburg of Beacon Economics.
And I've heard it said that the cost of conveyance would double if LA doesn't cut its imports in half. Is that true? And why doesn't your analysis address that issue?
I'm Grant Hogue with the Office of Public Accountability. I prepared the technical analysis of the report, and in essence, Metropolitan charges the Department of Water and Power here in LA primarily on a volumetric basis, roughly 85% of their costs. The remainder comes from assessed value taxes on properties within the city. As most of the costs from MWD are volumetric, if LA successfully implements its local water plan as defined in the 2010 Urban Water Management Plan, we will be reducing significantly the volume of water that we take in a average or typical year from Metropolitan. And therefore, on a volumetric basis, we would be paying less of those costs associated with the Bcdp project that would be charged through the Metropolitan volumetric charges. I hasten to add, however, that our calculations have included a variety of scenarios, including looking at all of the Metropolitan costs of the Bcdp being billed on a ad valorem tax basis, and continue to believe that our conclusions are essentially correct in that the Bcdp costs to the residents and businesses of LA are not going to be significant. The cost will be roughly $2 to $4 per household per month under most scenarios that we can anticipate.
So we're assuming costs will go down because we do significant work with local water supplies as well.
The costs I just cited are exclusively and specifically for the Bcdp project and not for Metropolitan's other costs that were currently billed. But yes, you're correct that although our study was isolated to identifying the specific costs associated with the Bcdp conveyance project, integral in that is that we will reduce our demands on Metropolitan by enhancing our local water supply sources, which have their own set of costs that must be charged through the Department of Water and Power.
And I think their report really doesn't focus very much on our own alternative opportunities. So I would hope that when we comment on it, that we note that those alternatives should be covered as well.
Thank you. Mr. Weiser? Okay, very good. So why don't we go ahead and take public comment again? We release our agendas typically on Fridays. It's when we got the news from the state that things have changed. Our agenda today is with respect to the BDCP plan and associated environmental impact report, environmental impact statement. But I would welcome those who have made the journey to City Hall to speak to that and as much as they need to cost as well, because we'll be hearing that item 2 weeks from now. We're going to continue this item because we're going to expand the scope of the report, but we want to make sure that we give people an opportunity to comment on all of it today. So with that, Tim Piaski please come forward. John Howland, Weston Labar, and Rachel Malerich. Please come forward.
Good afternoon, Chairman Fuentes, members of the committee. My name is Tim Piaski. I'm with the Building Industry Association of Southern California, the LA Ventura chapter. And we are the voice of residential building and development. And, water is a critical component for us as well as the city. And it's really important as we look at moving forward that we have a diversified portfolio of ways that we handle our water resources. And the Bay Delta Conservation Plan is one of those methods. And it's critical that the city doesn't rely 100% on local sources, because I don't think they can get there 100%. And so we would ask that you definitely move forward with the study on Bay Delta Plan and implement a process to support. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm John Howland with the Central City Association. CCA supports the Bay Delta Conservation Plan and Alternative 4 as it's outlined in its draft EIR-EIS. Securing a long-term and reliable baseline supply of water for the city and for the region is of paramount importance to CCA and our members. We believe that the EIR and EIS's Alternative 4 best helps resolve both the conveyance and the ecosystem concerns in the Delta. And while we're concerned with the price of the project, we are more concerned about the cost of inactivity. The current water intake and delivery system is unsustainable and under threat from earthquakes, sea level rise, and other factors. Doing nothing should not be considered an option. And while CCA supports maximizing our in-basin sources and continuing to improve conservation and water efficiency, and DWP should be applauded for its work that it's already done in this area, this alone is not a sufficient answer. The city, the region, and the state are all reliant on water deliveries from the Delta. We urge you to support Alternative 4. Thank you.
Weston Labar with the South Bay Association of Chambers of Commerce. We represent 16 member chambers and over 53,000 businesses in southern Los Angeles County. And we've explored the BDCP over the last 3 years. Many of our members, including myself, has taken the tour that Metropolitan Water District puts on. And we strongly support option number 4. Our businesses deserve reliable water, amongst other things. And this is one of the top priorities for our businesses in the South Bay. We actually recently went to Sacramento, and that was one of the number one issues we had was conveying to our members in the Assembly and the Senate our support of option number 4. We think this is a growing issue of 2/3 of the population in the state. In Southern California, we need to make sure that over the long term we have a sustainable and reliable water source.
Hello, my name is Rachel Mallert, and I am the Forestry Senior Manager with Tree People. We are celebrating over 40 years of serving Los Angeles County. And while we have not formally decided whether we are going to support the BDC project, we'd like to share our view on the analysis done by the Ratepayer Advocate. We feel like it grossly underestimates the amount the BDC plan would cost city ratepayers, and we encourage the city not to take a position until a more robust cost and policy analysis has been done, including significant investments to local water supply. We're also concerned that LA ratepayers may not have the appetite to stomach both the PDCP costs as well as costs to implement the local water supply. which we believe in the long run will bring more local jobs to Los Angeles instead of exporting them to these sources of our water. Thank you.
Elizabeth Shapiro, Frank Lopez, Alexandra Naji, and Walker Foley. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Frank Lopez. I'm here on behalf today of the LA Chamber of Commerce to express our support for Bdcp and in particular alternative number 4 as outlined in the draft EIR-EIS. Securing a reliable baseline supply of imported water for LA's $1 trillion regional economy via the Bdcp is of paramount importance for LA's business community. We are deeply concerned that half of the city's current water supply is in jeopardy due to fragile levees and ecosystem deterioration in the Delta. We support efforts to decrease the city's dependence on imported water. However, we know, based on DWP's urban water management plan, that imported water will continue to account for at least a quarter of the city's water supply 20 years from now, despite a threefold increase in its use of local supplies. Ultimately, we don't view this as a Bdcp versus local supplies issue. We see Bdcp as a complementary strategy that will ensure the city has the necessary water readily available should it need to supplement its local supplies with imported water. We believe after tracking this process for several years that the $3 to $5 increase in cost for water is a prudent investment and that inaction would be more costly. So thank you for that.
Good afternoon. I'm Elizabeth Shapiro, speaking on behalf of BizFed, the Los Angeles County Business Federation, a grassroots alliance of over 120 major business organizations with more than 280,000 businesses, including 80,000 in the city of Los Angeles. We're here to express our strong support for the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, and specifically alternative number 4, as the best way to meet California's co-equal goals of water supply reliability and Delta ecosystem restoration. We support LA DWP's involvement in the assessment process as well. The construction of new water intakes and related conveyance is an essential element of the Bay Delta Conservation Plan. The proposed twin tunnel system will protect public water supplies. The new intakes in the northern Delta will reduce conflicts between water systems and migrating fish species. Habitat improvements will provide native species with healthy ecosystems they need. 50 years of regulatory stability will protect an estimated 1.1 million jobs throughout the state and create more than 177,000 jobs from construction projects and environmental restoration. Southern California is rebuilding its aging infrastructure to ensure its water supplies are reliable. We need the same kind of investment in the State Water Project to safeguard our imported supplies.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Alex Nagy, and I'm the Southern California organizer with Food and Water Watch, a consumer watchdog group that works to keep water in the public trust and out of corporate water privatization schemes. We have taken a hard stance against the Bay Delta Conservation Plan and will continue to build pressure against this boondoggle. Despite the fact that this project will do more harm than good to the most precious estuary we have in our state, we have a hard time understanding why urban water ratepayers will be forced to pay for this project when it will bring no benefits to urban customers. This project is a boondoggle that will cost LA ratepayers up to $6 billion and up to $9,000 a household. Los Angeles is an arid region, and it's clear we need to invest in water infrastructure and conservation programs. What we don't need is to needlessly raise water rates for a project that will only benefit corporate agriculture and oil companies in the Central Valley. We need to save LA ratepayer monies whenever possible, because when the time comes to ask Angelenos to invest in local water projects we actually need, we need them to be on our side and not taxed out. The Bdcp is clearly a handout for big ag and frackers that will endlessly ride on our backs, and it needs to stop.
Thank you very much.
I'm Walker Foley, also with Food and Water Watch, and I strongly urge you today not to fast-track comments on the Bay Delta Conservation Plan until Los Angeles has done a full review of the alternatives. The numbers cited in this motion are at best deceptive. The project has been most recently slated to cost $67 billion, which has been confirmed by DWR's Mark Cohen, and that's a far cry from the $14 to $16 billion slated in this motion. We disagree with Fred Pickle's analysis, as the cost estimates are based on 2012 dollars and the assumption that energy prices will remain constant through the first 40 years of the project. An independent analysis from 2012 cites the total cost to LA ratepayers as anywhere from $6 to $19 per month. So the ratepayers analysis is inadequate. And frankly, I'm surprised that DWP is supporting this when they know full and well that the majority of LA's water infrastructure is 10 to 20 years past its design shelf life. DWP just told us that this project will create a reliable supply of water in bad years, but what they didn't tell you is that the tunnels will only be used in wet years, which will be increasingly few with climate change in the years ahead.
Very good. Thank you very much. Brenna Norton, D. Zink, Felicia Bander, and David Pettit, please. Please be good.
Okay, my name is Brenna Norton. I'm a community organizer with Food and Water Watch. I work with many of your constituents in districts here on the council today. Many are opposed to this project. They have put in letters of opposition to this motion and this project. I'm here to speak in opposition to this motion today. Foremost, let's be very, very clear. By voting on this today, you are not just commenting or reviewing this project. This motion clearly takes a stance of support for the Bay Delta. You are voting for a tax and rate hike for Los Angeles ratepayers. You are signing a blank check for ratepayer money for a project we don't know the cost of. The motion cites 14 to 16 billion. Well, the latest cost is 67 billion. There is no financing plan. There is no agreement on the final cost. You also have no review of alternatives and the externalities of local water programs, the likelihood of significant cost increases, the effect on thousands of local jobs by investing in local water programs. Without looking at this, you can't take a position and you can't comment today on this.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. I'm not D-Zink, but I am Tom Philp. I represent the Metropolitan Water District out of their Sacramento office. I will get to see the Delta twice today in the Sierra, and I report that it's beautiful and dry. Metropolitan imports water from the Delta for Los Angeles and the other 25 member agencies. We have reviewed the draft EIS, EIR, and the draft Habitat Conservation Plan. We believe it is a workable platform to a final plan. I encourage you to read the implementation agreement as well. It is a mere 100 pages compared to the rest of the documents. And in closing, Metropolitan has a very close and important relationship with Los Angeles. You are very important shapers of our policies, and we look forward to working with you in the weeks and months ahead on this. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Felicia Bander. California is dealing with the drought. Water scarcity will continue to be an area of utmost concern for Los Angeles, for California, for the world. Water, of course, is one of our most precious resources. What is not needed is a so-called conservation plan that endangers the very source of the water supply, is likely a water grab by those who want to frack California, and will then hand Los Angelinos a multi-billion-dollar tax bill as a thank you note. One fracking well uses up to 5 million gallons of irreplaceable fresh water. We don't need fracking now because in this age of clean, renewable energy, we have many options as to how we can power our lifestyles. There is no way to manufacture water. What is needed is for us to move LA's water policies into the 21st century with wise and sustainable citywide programs and infrastructure investments that capture rainwater, conserve and recycle this most valuable resource.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is David Pettit. I'm a lawyer with NRDC, Natural Resources Defense Council. I do CEQA and NEPA litigation for a living, more or less, and I want to just add a technical comment on the draft EIR here, and that is I was very pleased to hear from staff earlier about the local alternatives that they're looking at, but to really make those stick in the environmental review process, the city needs to ask the reviewing agencies to analyze those as alternatives for the project, and in particular, the One Water Plan that the city has enacted, stormwater capture, local groundwater enhancement, and enhanced watershed management. If those comments aren't made in the EIR process, then they're not going anywhere, and from my standpoint as a lawyer and your counsel's standpoint, you can't litigate about them if you haven't made the comments. So let's help staff make real what they are working on and put those comments in with the lead agency. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Dr. Tom Williams, Richard Atwater, Doug Arsenault, and this here corner events. I'm sorry, Connor Everett. Your writing's as nice as mine. Very good.
Dr. Tom Williams, Sierra Club Water Committee, also roughly 30 years with Parsons and URS on water resources. However, we also passed the State Water Project a long time ago. This project is really not well described in the EIR, in the plan, because it's basically a relief to the San Joaquin Valley, because very few people know that they are in much more desperate need of water, and the 6 million acre feet from the Sacramento River will largely bypass the San Joaquin Valley, except for certain areas, and will supply all of Southern California. However, all of the water from the Southern Sierra will go to the San Joaquin, so they don't have to depend upon the Delta. Here's one of the problems. So please oppose. Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard Atwater. I'm the Executive Director of the Southern California Water Committee. It's a nonprofit organization, been around since 1984, working on water issues throughout Southern California. We're here to indicate support for the Bdcp, and for a couple of reasons, and I would just highlight a couple that haven't been addressed so far. One is earthquake reliability. I just note that we've had workshops throughout Southern California, from San Diego to Ventura County, talking about earthquake reliability. And one of the key benefits of Bdcp are the tunnels in the Delta, which U.S. Geological Survey, professors from Cal, Stanford, USC, UCLA just recently talked at a workshop out in Rancho Cucamonga, all identified that the tunnels would be a significant reliability benefit. And the last thing I would say is we've also continued to work with the City of LA very closely and everybody in Southern California on efforts to increase local water supplies. In fact, later this month we'll have our 3rd annual stormwater workshop, and we continue to look forward to working with the City of Los Angeles. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Doug Arsenault of the Valley Industry and Commerce Association, representing more than 400 businesses in the city and surrounding areas. VICA strongly supports moving forward with commenting on the Bdcp EIR. California's water infrastructure is extremely outdated and fragile. LA residents are at a severe risk of losing access to our water supply. Should an earthquake disrupt the flow, as my colleague said, an earthquake will result in a loss of more than 550,000 jobs and $55.6 billion in GDP. We cannot afford these hits to our residents and businesses. VICA strongly supports moving forward with Alternative 4, the only plan that sufficiently restores and protects the Delta environment while also ensuring that California has reliable water supply for years to come. Additionally, as a CEQA preferred alternative, Alternative 4 will ensure that our water infrastructure is renovated with a twin tunnel system in a timely manner. It's time for California to be proactive in protecting our water supply with the right plan option. We ask the city support Alternative 4. Thank you.
Connor Everett, Southern California Watershed Alliance, and I have a different opinion on this, and we could probably argue, but what I think the really important thing is that you have an opportunity here to look at local water first, because even if the BDCP plan was to move forward, by many estimates, it's going to be 10 to 20 years before it's implemented. What do we do in that interim? What we've done in the past is saved water in Los Angeles, and I think we should focus on that first. We don't have a financing plan for this. What we need is a financing plan for our local water programs and how we're going to pay for that. And to that, I would suggest that DWP work with environmental organizations as they have in the past, and as we did when we did water conservation with community-based organizations, work with Green LA and others who have talked to the ratepayer advocate and brought up our issues. And we really are concentrating on where we are in the next 10 years. And in the meantime, hopefully we'll get a finance plan and see who's really going to pay for BDCP. Thank you very much.
Very good. David Kirsch, please.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. My name is David Kirsch. I'm the Executive Director of the Carpenters Contractors Cooperation Committee, which is a labor management organization comprised of the Southwest Regional Council of Carpenters and signatory contractors. I'm here to show our support for the Delta Conservation Plan and its goal of protecting the water supply that serves 26 million Californians, 3 million acres of farmland, and our businesses. This water supply is essential to Los Angeles and the state to spur job creation and keep the economy moving. The Bay Delta Conservation Plan is the smart and overdue investment to update our aging 50-year-old water system. It is critical that we take action now. The Delta is facing enormous ecological and structural challenges: saltwater intrusion, chemical pollution, dangerously unstable levees, and reduced water deliveries to protect endangered fish. In addition to the benefits of having safe and reliable water supplies, it is estimated that the plan would create and protect more than 1 million jobs. The construction and habitat restoration projects would create more than 150,000 jobs, including jobs for Carpenter union members. We urge your support for the plan.
Very good, thank you. With that, colleagues, what we'll do is we'll continue the matter for the next committee meeting and request the Department of Water and Power to provide draft comments on the following items given the state's new comment period deadline: the draft BDC plan, the draft EIR and EIS, and the draft implementing agreement. So we'll see y'all.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
Mr. Chairman, I was late. I'm sorry, but I was listening there. Can I ask that they just have any fact sheet? I just need to know on desalinization. I just met recently with the Council General of the State of Israel, and he was explaining some processes, and I thought I would talk to my friends at Water and Power. Could I ask them to give us a little, or does that complicate it? Separate issue?
It doesn't complicate it, I think Marty mentioned a little bit about sort of the higher hanging fruit. So I think that when the comments come back, we'll get a sense as to whether it's in there or not. And if not, we could certainly agendize that as another strategy that we should be talking about.
And Mr. Chairman, I wanted to say today is River Day.
It is.
And our biggest challenge with the river is to try to keep water in the river. A lot of people want to take the water out for a lot of uses, which is very important. Ms. Edwards, I'd love to see you give a bunch of Caltrans so they can make their trees look good on the freeway system and reclaim more like you do. But that's our big challenge, too. It's a very valuable, much wanted. It's all about life, man. Water and relationships. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Labange. So we'll go ahead and see y'all in 2 weeks.
Thank you. Very good.
Item number 2.
Item number 2, Mr. Chair. Motion Corretz Fuentes relative to directing the Bureau of Sanitation, Department of Building and Safety report regarding the status of methane gas operations and methane gas plumes in the city and steps they engage in to identify and control methane leaks. Mr. Chair, the Bureau of Sanitation has a handout that you're receiving right now. It's not a formal written report, but it is a handout to provide background.
Very good. Staff, if you would introduce yourself and present on your handout.
Good morning. My name is Khalil Garis, Bureau of Sanitation Division Manager. I'll be reporting this afternoon on the landfill portion of the motion.
Yes. Good afternoon. Andy Cal, Los Angeles Building and Safety, Code Enforcement, Local Enforcement Agency.
Okay. Starting with the landfill portion, the City of Los Angeles, the Bureau of Sanitation, owns and maintains 5 closed landfills throughout the city. As part of the post-closure maintenance of all our landfills, we are required to monitor those landfills on the surface and to monitor them at the boundaries. The way we control the landfill gas emission from these landfills, we have several miles of header pipes and collection wells that are installed in a strategic location within the fill area where we provide vacuum and we suck all that gas, and that the majority of the gas that we collect currently, over 90% of it is used to produce energy, and the other 10% is being destructed by flaring. On the surface, what we do, we monitor the surface. We have environmental compliance inspectors that on a monthly basis, they walk the entire landfill with electronic equipment to make sure that the surface, we don't have any landfill gas coming off the surface. And if we do find any, we are required by the regulatory agencies to repair them within 72 hours. And also we have at the perimeter of all our landfills what we call perimeter probes. We monitor those also on a monthly basis to make sure that our gas collection system is working properly. So that way if we have any issues hit on the perimeter probe, we just have to monitor the gas well more and improve the collection. For the last over a decade, we've never had any problem with gas migration in our landfills. as of today. Thank you.
Mr. Koretz. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr.
Mr. Koretz.
Mr. Koretz, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know back in March, President Obama proposed rules to cut methane emissions, and as we all know, they contribute many times more to greenhouse gases than carbon dioxide. We have methane plumes in various places outside of landfills, Playa Vista, La Brea tar pits, and others. Do we have a franchise agreement with Southern California Gas, and does it require them to monitor these? Or do we monitor them?
Well, the question is to sanitation. We are not the Bureau and Department charged with that particular task.
Is there a department that...
We've done some assistance in, we had last year where we were called on because there were some plume that were found in the La Brea pit area, so we had staff there to ensure that the plume doesn't go any further from the location. It was coming out of the storm drain system, so we were there just to provide the assistance and help, for that. But it wasn't. We weren't in charge of that particular task.
So is it DWP that has the primary responsibility for this, or does...
If we could ask the CAO's
I'm not
office
sure.
to come on up, they would handle any franchise agreements. Mr. Hirano, welcome to the committee.
Thank you. If I understand you correctly, you're asking about the gas company franchise?
I'm asking both about monitoring them and also monitoring other hotspots. Who's in charge of that, and how do we do it?
Oh, well, that's a slightly different question. The franchise agreements are actually administered through the Department of Transportation, and any construction activity, permits that are pulled are monitored through the Department of Public Works and Bureau of Engineering. So we're only involved at this point in helping renegotiate the agreements, the franchise agreements with the gas company. So if you want an answer along that lines which you just described, we'd have to get back to you with that answer, and we can certainly do so.
Okay, well, maybe as we approve the motion that we're discussing and move it on, maybe we can ask for the DWP to report back on DWP and whomever else has responsibility for it ultimately.
Transportation and Public Works. We can get the information for you from them and
so if we can ask them to report back on how they monitor potential gas leaks and minimize them.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's not a problem.
Mr. Luange.
The CAO's office used to have a petroleum coordinator. What was the title?
Petroleum administrator, correct.
Yeah, and how long ago we lost it?
Well, we haven't had a single position staffed, but the role still rests with our office.
I understand that, but this is a big issue. I mean, if we're doing, the people mention fracking, and people mention water, and people mention all these issues here. The subway's coming out Wilshire. We're going to go through that methane zone. The late great Dr. Eisenstadt wrote the study that assures us that it's going to be safe. And I believe it's Public Works, and it's a contract that goes to Curzon and Wilshire, where the tar comes up right now. If you walk to Curzon and Wilshire, southwest corner, you're going to get your shoes healed, Dick. Is that what that happened? They get new tar on your... So, but I think a contractor comes out. Who pays the contractor for that? Occasionally, if it's like an emergency, street services will come out. I think these are some of the questions Mr. Koretz is digging at as far as responsibility. So I think it would be helpful, but I would also like to ask casually, Mr. Chairman, that maybe there needs to be a petroleum coordinator or mineral or whatever the right word is. Sure. What's another word, Mr. CAO?
we call it the petroleum administrator, but there is no one person doing that job right now.
I got it, but I think I understand at Pico and Bundy there's a oil well that's been there for 50, 60, 70 years. I understand Baldwin Hills. I have challenges if we frack in Baldwin Hills because it's so close. I do not have challenges if we frack in Canada because that's way, 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 way far away from us. But all these issues are coming up, and I think we should, have more of an urban look at it because I don't know if anybody said this. I know Chris Chappelle did that big dive when the earthquake came, but have they been doing any fracking in Brea or anywhere in that area? Remember the Boy Scout? Were you a Boy Scout, Paul?
Yeah, I was.
Yeah, what troop number?
Oh, what was it, 200?
527. We went to Brea, and there was Firestone Camp. And there's all these old oil wells there. And quite possibly, I don't know, but all this is changing. Everybody's in a race. None of us stop to say, what is our values? How do we do it right? So I just wanted to throw that out. And also to the CAO's representative for sanitation, the one thing on the nice report that you have on Toyon and Lopez and Sheldon and all that, the only one place that I know in the city that you're doing it now at Sheldon, Arleta, is that in the 6th or 7th district?
It's in the 6th.
6th district, so that's very good. But Toyon, which carried trash from 57 to 87 or something, if you look at the park, it's a big scar right there, and when are you going to plant some trees? And the last mayor was a million tree man. He could have put 1 million up there in a day, and he would have reached his goal. But are we going to ever plant some trees up there in Toyon?
Great question, Councilman. Yeah, we have planted around 200 trees, and they still, you can't see them because we planted them about 3 years ago. So, and then we were going to plant more than that, but the issue was that we were stopped by the Regional Water Quality Control Board because of the deep-rooted trees and the issue with the cover.
What kind of trees?
When the trees grow, the roots will penetrate the cover of the landfill.
So they want to make sure for clean soil. Okay.
Yeah, right. So what we tried to with them is let's just watch those 150 trees that we already planted, and then if we find out that we're not damaging the cover, then we can add more trees. So we're hoping within the next 3 years we can go back and see.
I don't got 3 years, pal. I got a year and a month. I want to plant some trees. Thank you.
Okay.
Why don't we do this? Let's go ahead and continue this item for 30 days. Asked BOS, DBS to, as well as the Department of Transportation and Public Works, to come back and give us a sense to what the custody chain is and who's responsible, the administrator, whomever it is, to sort of help us understand what happened so that we can address Mr. Koretz's concerns and yours, Mr. LeBlanc. So why don't we hold the item? We'll see you all in 30 days.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Koretz.
I know Mr. LeBlanc also introduced a motion a month or two ago asking that we look at the methane buildup around the Miracle Mile area where the metro construction is going to be going on. So I wonder if we could sandwich all that together.
I think sort of understanding how we do the process will help illuminate what it is that's going there and not. So we'll certainly have that conversation in its totality in 30 days. So come on back, Mr. Harana, if you'd help us get DOT or whomever in Public Works to come and sort of speak to that. With that, there are some speaker cards on item 2. Dr. Tom Williams, Jasmine Vargas, and Kent Manal.
Thank you, Mr. Harano. Mr. CIO, thank you.
Good afternoon. Dr. Tom Williams, Citizens Coalition for a Safe Community out of Culver City. We have done maybe 100 miles of real-time methane monitoring of the streets of Los Angeles. And there's a lot of leaky areas. One, next to the downtown oil field at 14th and Hill, right in the midst of the city. So we have evidence, direct evidence of many methane leaks, including the ones at Wilshire and Cruzon. Oh, by the way, I was at 3rd and Ogden for 3 days when we had a blowout in 1985 because so much methane came out. Fortunately, Hawthorne did not have an ignition of its methane, but nobody seems to know where it came from or what it was doing.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Hello. And good afternoon. My name is Jasmine Vargas. I am a resident of Northeast LA. I'm a constituent of Gil Cedillo. And I, first of all, want to thank Paul Koretz for introducing this motion. I'm also a very passionate climate justice advocate. I work with the Sierra Club, but my repertoire goes beyond environment and coal, but also clean energy and fighting fracking. So the idea of climate justice is that we work with the communities that have been most underserved and most historically disproportionately affected by pollution, and by pollution that is mostly in low-income communities and communities of color, as we see here in Los Angeles being the most polluted area in the nation of ozone and other sources of toxic chemicals. But we also have high levels of methane and carbon dioxide that we're emitting into the atmosphere. So I agree that we should support this so that we can reduce and mitigate the greenhouse gas emissions from our city and be climate leaders.
Hi, I'm Kent Minot from the Sierra Club LA Beyond Coal. Thank you for putting this motion forward. We're just scratching the surface on methane because there is tons of methane emerging from our environment. Through the work that you all are doing here and in City Council, a picture of a sustainable energy future is starting to emerge, the outlines of it. 1,200 megawatts of a FIT program, a 600 megawatt FIT program, 1,200 megawatts of rooftop solar, 15% energy efficiency. If we do all of these things and we have increased utility scale renewable energy coming in, it still won't save our bacon unless we deal with the methane that's seeping out of our city, which is a natural oil lake. So I totally support what you're doing here, and I think it's urgent that we put a cap on the methane, because otherwise all that other great stuff y'all are doing won't really amount to that much. Thank you very much for putting this forward.
Very good. That brings us to item 3.
Item number 3, Chair. Motion, Bond and Buscano relative to directing the Bureau of Street Services to report regarding its procedures for issuing contracts for tree trimming work and measures to ensure that trimming and pruning complies with city's policy. We have staff from Bureau of Street Services.
Very good. If Street Services and DWP can come on up. Now, colleagues, this item was previously heard in Public Works Committee and was referred to this committee because the Department of Water and Power is involved with tree trimming. And in my conversations with Councilmember Bonin and observing the budget conversations and hearing from our constituents, I'm now, I think, a little bit less clear as to how it is that we do tree trimming or deal with trees and whom it is that's doing it, because there are moments where you have the Department of Water and Power doing something to trees, street services, and I think there's other agencies too that touch the trees in the city of Los Angeles, and it seems like a really disparate sort of way to address trees, and I think that's why, in part, this is here. So if you could help us understand what happened in Public Works Committee and how you all fit, you all being Street Services and DWP, into all of that, that would be helpful.
Okay. I'll start. My name is George Gonzalez. I'm the Chief Forester. I'm with the Bureau of Street Services. And in Bureau of Street Services, we maintain trees in the public right-of-way, that is, street trees. 700,000 street trees. A percentage of those, probably about 20% or so, are under power lines. Before our division was cut back in 2008, we were a full-service tree care company or tree care agency. So that meant that we did everything from tree removal to tree planting, everything in between. Did proactive tree pruning. Since 2008, we've been relegated down to an emergency response unit. So we don't do any proactive tree trimming with city forces anymore. The council did restore some funding for tree trimming using contract forces, and we've been doing that. But where Department of Water and Power gets involved in street trees is in that 20% more or less of the street trees that are under power lines. Back when we were doing full service, our forces would trim trees. Let's say we'd go on a particular block, one side of the street, was under power lines, the other side was not, we would trim both sides of the street, whether it's under power lines or not.
This is before 2008?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. Department of Water and Power's mission is slightly different now. I'll let Mr. Chavez talk about that. But there are times when those tree trimming functions did kind of merge or overlap. But since the cutback, that overlap has reduced significantly. So I'll let Mr. Chavez talk about how.
So before we go, so in 2008, matter of the budget and policy, you all moved from in-city forces to a contracting out model to deal with streets.
Well, we always had a mix of
contracting
and city forces. I believe in 2008, 2009, we did not receive any funding for either contract tree trimming or city forces. So there was a couple of years that there was no trimming of trees in the public right-of-way.
So from a resource perspective, things changed in 2008. Did our street tree policies change as a result of sort of what resources we were no longer spending on the trees? I mean, we're still conforming with the International Society of Arboriculture, or did the street tree policy actually change?
No, the street tree policy, the document street tree policy that dictates or spells out the best management practices that we should follow, we still follow those. So that didn't change.
Based on the resources that you have?
Right. The resources changed, the policy did not.
Okay. All right. Yes, sir.
Adrian Chavez. I'm with Department of Water and Power Vegetation Management Group. And we trim trees not only in the public right-of-way, in people's backyards, for transmission, where we generate power from the Owens Valley and other power sources. But when it comes to the street tree policies, what we do is, we trim those trees away from high voltage and low voltage power lines.
Do you trim them according to the street tree policies?
Well, the
Or do you have a separate policy for how you trim trees?
We take into consideration the ISA's BMPs, the best management practices, but we have to adhere to the California Public Utility Commission, GO 95 Rule 35, where we have to maintain certain clearances. Taking those clearances into account and taking the other ISA BMPs, we try to follow that, but sometimes because the tree is not in the right location, the trees don't look so good.
But your primary function isn't the ISA BMPs.
No.
It's making sure that you're within the PUCs.
The CPUCs, correct.
CPUCs sort of regulations in terms of clearance and sort of where the lines are with respect to the trees.
That is correct.
So you dispatch your resources based on sort of the challenges that the trees are posing to the lines, and that's it.
That is correct.
Okay.
Our number one goal is no outages.
Understood. Okay, I'm sorry. Continue.
80% of our work is contracted. The other 20% is in-house crews. As far as budgeting, it's a different animal. Because of the outages, the funding is there for us.
So you're an 80-20 mix of contractor to in-house personnel. 2008, maybe 2009, 0 personnel, and then a contracting model after that.
That's correct.
Are you all working in the same universe of contractors?
No.
No.
Because the spirit of Mr. Bonin's motion, I think, speaks to the challenges that contracting has had on, one, our ability to maintain the pruning of trees, not necessarily to keep the power on, but from another perspective. But it also, I think, wants to establish some potential penalties and monetary fines on contractors depending on their performance. But the word on the street is that the contractors are colluding, and as a result, I saw an analysis for areas in my district where the prices were significantly higher, or at least alleged to be higher than what they otherwise would have been if we had in-city personnel handling the contracting. So I think the policy debate or question is, are we better off going back to the pre-2008 model having in-city forces deal with this, or maybe have a blend with contracting. And then two, from my perspective, how we make it so that, understanding that you have a core mission and you have a mission, but resources sort of are highly dependent upon sort of what's happening with our economy, how we have a uniform approach to any time any person with the authority of the city of Los Angeles touches a tree. Because it doesn't seem like there's a uniform approach. Understandably so, but I'm just sort of talking out loud here. Christine, I feel emotion coming on. So I think that, to me, that's important to sort of highlight. What other agencies, to your knowledge, touch trees in Los Angeles with our authority as a contractor or city personnel?
Sure. Recreation and Parks, Harbor, LAX, and everybody does it slightly different.
Slightly different. But
everybody's got a slightly different mission. Yes.
Sure. So, okay. Questions, colleagues? Mr. Weiser.
Thank you. One of my biggest pet peeves in terms of the city's inability to deliver service is our trees and our tree trimming that we are supposed to be delivering. It's quite frustrating, at least in my district, that we didn't have any funding for tree trimming for some time. Even after we did, this was 3 years ago, we put money in the budget for 2 years in a row, and we had an inability to go out there and trim trees. We were told over and over, we were promised over and over that the trees were going to get trimmed. It's in the next cycle, it's in the next cycle. Those promises were broken to me and to my constituents. We have to fix this. It is unacceptable. And I understand now in this budget cycle, we've actually put in more money, and we have to execute. The money's been there for 3 years to trim trees. And I don't have an explanation for my constituents where those trees keep growing and growing and growing, and no one is going out there to trim them. Secondly, I want to piggyback on what Mr. Fuentes is saying, in that we've got to do a better job in having one agency or collaborating better on what we do to go out there and trim our trees. You go to different parts in just one block, and these trees are trimmed differently by different ways, and some of them are trimmed one way, others are trimmed another. And on DWP, I think with your resources, I drive some blocks, and these trees look like, what's that clown from The Simpsons with a hair just like this?
Krusty the Clown.
Krusty the Clown. I mean, and it's this bushy tree that nobody touches, but yet around the power lines, you could see that it's been cleared there. If we have people up there, we're the same city, why can't we just trim accordingly? And since we're there, to me, it's one of the biggest frustrations I've seen in terms of our city's inability to provide a public service. And Mr. Fuentes touched upon, I have a lot to say about this, by the way. Mr. Fuentes touched upon how we could go about this, which is either, number one, fixing the problem if our contractors are not reliable, which is the response I get after 3 years. Well, let's fix it. Let's get in-house if that's the problem, or let's get those hefty penalties and apply them to those contractors. Whatever it is, the system is broken. Secondly, I'm very interested in seeing how we could have a better approach as a city family addressing the trees, so that not only if it is just one department, they look funky compared to another street, but that we're all have some standards that we abide by. I mean, I drive by Alhambra, South Pasadena, same ficus trees, but they're well maintained. They don't have the same issues that we have in our city in terms of how we're addressing it. This is a real problem for us, and especially for those low-income neighborhoods that have, I always constantly ask myself this question, and why is it that some parts of the city could be better maintained than others? And I look at bids, I look at new development as some responses to some reasons why some areas are cleaner, get better fixed up other times, but sometimes I'm beginning to think that we are neglecting our low-income neighborhoods when I look at basic service delivery like this, and it's something that's really frustrating, and it's got to get fixed.
Mr. LaBonge, did they get the memo? Do you know who I'm talking about?
I know the trees did not get the memo that we did reduce our budget, so the trees kept growing. And one of the bad things is right now, and I put it on the record again, George, you got to get back, number of traffic signals now do have growth near on them that we would be liable if there was an accident there. What I would also suggest, Mr. Chairman, that we immediately start somewhere, and for 30 days or 4 working weeks, you're all in the 14th. You start at Huntington Drive in the city limits of Alhambra, and you drive Huntington Drive up and down, and then you keep going. And the other thing too is on the contract, I have no problem with contracts. It's the contract administration. We are the conductor of the orchestra. They are the orchestra. We tell them what to play and how to play, and we conduct it. It's up to us to make sure. Now, there may have been a breakdown there. And I have no problem with DWP because their mission is reliable energy and quality water. But Mr. Weezer, and I didn't know he watched The Simpsons still, but I guess he did, a big Princeton man, made a good point because you could take a ficus tree and flatten it out. You go on Los Feliz Boulevard, it's not your power, but it's West Hollywood's power, it's Edison's, and what they have to do, the tree gets up to the line and they take the hat off. They just take the hat off and it's no longer available. Martin, you'd look good on Los Feliz Boulevard without the hat there. So I think it's so important that you maybe come up with this is a good idea. And also for the mayor or the mayor's office is listening, I put the urban forestry and recreation of parks, water and power, and city street tree together and say, what can we do? What if we took 1 week out of the month and said, okay, team approach, everybody on the street just going through the area, because the trees kept growing. So, but as far as the different style of trees, like you go to a different barber, but it's up to the contract administrator. George, do you have your own contract administrators, or are they under contract administration, or are they under street tree?
It's a mix. We do use Bureau of Contract Administration, but we do the inspection with in-house staff. But that in-house staff, we used to have in-house staff that was dedicated strictly to contract administration.
Right.
Now those folks are doing multiple jobs.
Multiple jobs. We're in a multiple job world now, so this is the problem that we have to live with. So I would just state that. I do believe in the 60-40 mix. How busy are the... and why the one thing too about cities, when you trim them on a better frequency, you have to trim less. I once was in Paris, and it was the central part of Paris in a business district, and they, with my broken English and his broken French, or vice versa, we communicated, and they go every year to this area, and they take a little off each tree, and it looks beautiful. And maybe that's something that would be if we took it hard and went for it. But the big thing is the safety issue. And by the way, George, I was at 4201 Fountain Avenue. There's a dead oak tree, and I picked a dead branch off the tree, off the sidewalk, and got rid of it. But I'm going to give you this note. You don't have to write anything down. It's right next to King Middle School, so if you get the dead tree, dead and gone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Labange. Mr. Koretz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm glad to hear I'm not the only one with these concerns. It sounds like we're all getting a lot of the same complaints in our districts. I think we have a problem with inadequate outreach, so various agencies just show up and trim trees, and the neighborhood isn't always expecting it, and sometimes the trees really get hacked, and then we have huge outrage in the neighborhood. I think we need to find some way to engage in best practices, and I don't know if we've done an analysis to look at Pasadena and some of the other cities that clearly do use best practices consistently, and you can see the difference. An environmental concern, I mean, it's not easy because we're trying to accomplish many things at once, including the fact that we might trim a tree once every 25 years, so we tend to hack it down to the bone. But especially with our facing global warming and expectation that our city is going to get hotter, we need to leave some leaves and some canopy on those trees at the same time. So we need to find some sort of a balance. Also, I know cities like Pasadena look at the trees as an ecosystem. So if there are birds' nests in the trees, they're not going to hack it apart the way we sometimes do. In fact, they usually bypass trees with a number of birds' nests. I don't know if we do that.
We do.
I'm suspicious that not all our contractors follow that, even if we give that direction. I also know we have rules against, I believe, just topping off trees, because that causes some harm to their growth, and I believe we've had contractors engage in that as well. So I don't know how we deal with that. Maybe we put an arborist on site at all our contracting locations. I think there needs to be some way to tighten that up. Although I tend to lean in the same direction as Mr. Weezer. I think we should very substantially restore our in-house forces, which I think actually were the most competent compared to our contractors. I think we need to look at other cities' best practices, and we need, as has been said already, to find some way to unify our forces more so we don't have 6 different systems of cutting trees and a lack of uniform look to them, et cetera, et cetera. There has to be a way to do all this better, to do it in a more efficient way by combining forces. So just a few thoughts, and I hope we will look at all those things as we move forward.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, can I just ask a question? Have you had a complaint in the last 24 months of a contractor who was under contract with the City of Los Angeles, did it a broadhead, is that the proper term?
Yes.
Tree trimming? Yep. Have you had a complaint about anything?
Yes, we have.
What kind of tree were they trimming?
Well, it was a variety of trees. This happened, I'm going to say, probably in January, and we did stop the contractor. Typically, what we do, and I'll try to get to all the questions that were asked. Typically, what we do in that type of situation is let me back up. In the past, we had the contract inspector out in the field with the contractor.
When they're trimming?
On a daily basis. Now, because of the staffing shortages, we're probably having an inspector out there once every 3 to 5 days, depending on the workload. So, in 3 to 5 days...
Wait just a second, Mr. Chair. We got to put in the contract that they got to pay for a daily contractor. And then also there's banded tree trimmers, like you trim because somebody paid them in front of a house or a business just to get the ficus tree whacked. 1 tree, 2 tree, 3 tree, right?
Yeah, that's a little bit slightly different than a contract trimming, if I understand what you're asking.
Yeah, but there's no police officer. You can't call 911 or 311 and say, go out to 6th in Plymouth and go after this tree trimming.
No, PD really doesn't know how to handle those type of calls. But what we did in that situation is we stopped the contractor. Oftentimes, trees are trimmed in such a way that they may be following International Society of Horticultural Standards, but the tree may not look aesthetically pleasing because of other issues. The tree had broken limbs, it had defects, had decay that aren't apparent once they finish trimming. So you can have a tree trimmed to ISA standards and still not look aesthetically pleasing. And that's part of what happened with that contractor, even though some of the trees were not done properly. So typically our policy is when we go out there and find that trees are not trimmed properly, we will initially give them a warning. Second time, we don't pay them for the work. So that usually quells the issue. In regards to the contractors not being able to prune the trees in Mr. Weezar's district, he had the unfortunate circumstance that we had a contractor walk off the job twice, same contractor. And he's currently abandoned the contract, which typically doesn't happen. I've been here 28 years, 16 at this position. This is the first time I've seen a contractor actually walk off the job. So that created problems. And to your question, whether you asked a little bit about the prices and whether it's better to have a mix or not. Prices have gone up from contractors, and I think there's 2 reasons for that. One reason is that the trees, because we deferred maintenance for some period of time, the trees got larger than they would have been. So they know that they're dealing with more brush, more expense, more time, so they charged more. That's one reason. The other reason is the contractors also know that they don't have in-house contractors that compete with them. So there's no competition in the game.
You need a 64, Bob Kennedy, when he was here. He was
exactly
tree trimmer, head tree trimmer. And he always said, you go 60-40, 60 some years, 40 another years, kept everybody on the level.
That's correct. So I I think that having a mix of a contract and in-house staff is critical. It's definitely needed. As far as having uniform tree trimming standards across the board, we have looked at consolidating all the tree trimming in the city back, I'm going to say maybe 10, 15 years ago. We looked at that. It didn't go anywhere. Each one of the agencies that trim trees have a slightly different mission. So while there can be some uniformity, there's always going to be some differences in the way trees are trimmed, particularly with water and power. They're more the exception because they have a very specific task that they have to do. What's done at parks, for street trees, for the harbor and the port, those are a little bit more similar, and there can be a little bit more uniformity in that.
But parks, they got a lot of heritage trees that need meticulous cutting.
They have a different mission than the street tree division would have. And to another point that you made about the uniformity and the quality of the work. Really, the quality of the work ultimately comes down to the cycle. We're currently on a 25-year trim cycle. That's an improvement from a 70-year trim cycle, which we were at. Pasadena, Santa Monica, all on a 3 to 5 year trim cycle. That makes a difference.
It does. So, understanding that, can I ask you, at a Public Works Committee, what was the instruction to you all other than sort of come and present here? What is it that they asked of you?
Well,
in your committee meeting before you got here?
Well, there was a lot of public comment. A lot of the public comment was geared to Department of Water and Power and to some of the work that was being done by the fire department, brush clearance type work in the hillside. So that's why it was referred to this committee.
Good. So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to continue the item for about 30 days and have the CAO and the CLA work with you all to develop a formal written report for the committee to review. But if you could sort of keep some of these things in mind. You know, who in the city of Los Angeles is cutting trees? So DWP, street services, the port, airport, contractors, who's cutting trees? Why are they cutting them? Speaking to the mission of each of those different agencies, understanding that, you know, DWP is doing the best job that they're supposed to be doing. But why is it that they are cutting the tree? What is the mission?
Right.
Who is paying for it? Because it's hard to ask DWP to go do something outside of the rate base area and vice versa. So I think that also really dictates the idea of how do you uniform. Well, the uniform thing is one thing. So it's tough to sort of deploy resources like that because there's two different pots of dollars, and with the proprietary agencies, maybe even more pots of dollars. So who is paying for it? And the last thing is how are we doing this? So I know that we've got ISA BMPs, but to your point about cycle and schedule, 70 years, 35 years, vast improvement, but we're still not going to look like San Marino or Pasadena on that schedule. So understanding how it is that this is getting done, is there a rubric that says ISA BMPs? Probably not number one for you all. Maybe it's number one for you all. Maybe it's not because it's traffic safety is number one. But how the trees are being cut at the location, I think gives us the ability to sort of take a real good look at all of this. And if nothing else, or rather, a real good look at this, and if we're lucky, it makes it so that we have a better case next budget cycle on how it is that we're going to dedicate these resources, understanding that the proprietaries have it a little bit different than you all. But I think that report helps us sort of shape the conversation on how it is that we're going to attack this, because we could be upset about how they're done on the streets, but it's not going to impact our sort of need to have a reliable, dedicated line working properly, and those trees are going to look really, really different on how they're cut. So I think if you can remember all of that as you're sort of putting your work together with the CAO and the CLA, I think that gives us a shot to understand who and how contractors are supposed to respond to, because at that point, maybe we then adopt a policy to ask contractors to adhere to this rubric depending on who's paying for the tree service. Because it seems like that disparate approach and the lack of understanding of who's in that universe doesn't give us the best deal either. So I think that's a start. And then we'll see y'all back when we do that. Yes, sir.
If I may, it's not that we're all doing our same thing. We have different missions.
Right.
But we do work together quite a bit.
Yep.
Because when we're trimming trees away from our power lines for public works, we're also taking into consideration Krusty the Clown. Okay, we're bringing the ends in, we're raising the trees, we're also clearing for red lights. And this is an agreement that we came into going back 15 plus years ago.
Sure.
In addition, we do work with the Harbor Department, we do work with Recreation and Parks. Whenever there's power lines involved, that's where we step in.
Sure. And it's not to say that I don't think that you all coordinate. I don't think that any one of us understands looking at a tree who did it and why it was done that way. And so if we can have a better understanding as to how all that works, maybe from a contract administration perspective, we can start tuning our asks and our expectations from contractors to at least give the ratepayer or the customer the feeling that it got quote-unquote pruned and trimmed, understanding that that means something different to whomever it is that they're responsible to it. So no, I absolutely believe that you all are working together. I think we just need to understand how to get our respective sort of stakeholders to understand what's happening out there. And maybe there's a way that we can make the case in the next budget season to have a mix like Mr. Labange's suggestion, 60-40. So we'll take it from there. I do have some cards on the item. Thank you very much for your presentation. Let's go ahead and hear from Allison Simard, Tony Tucci, Rachel Malarich, and Mike Woodward. And then Ryan Allen will take you as soon as there's room for you up here at the dais.
Hi, I'm Allison Simard. I'm from Citizens for Los Angeles Wildlife, a public benefit nonprofit advocacy or environmental advocacy organization whose mission is to protect, educate, and promote the fundamental importance of wildlife. Councilmember Koretz, thank you for putting the focus on environment. You know, when we look at trees in our environment, I understand that often they can become they're looked at as a nuisance and something that can be cut back. But in a high fire season, I want nothing better than a sequoia and an oak which hold water in the hillsides to surround my house as a barrier. When we're looking at pollution, when we're looking at water quality, these trees are essential and necessary. And also, I'd like to take into consideration, we talk about whether there should be arborists. Also, what's the consideration when we come across a nest? When we cut back a tree that has a hawk's nest in it, those hawks don't come back. So our wildlife are a barometer of our environmental health, and our trees are a measure of how we're doing.
Great, thank you.
My name is Tony Tucci, CLAW, Citizens for Los Angeles Wildlife. Hello, honorable council members. Thank you for the way this conversation has gone. I fully support the Mike Bonin motion. I wanted to ask for these uniform standards to always defer to our environment and our heritage trees. I want this motion to become something that's enforceable. I want a policy for all. I don't want the DWP, I don't want the fire department, I don't want the developers to be exempt from this. A team approach, a blend of the pre-2008 model, something that will strengthen urban forestry, but most importantly, what I think is missing, by strengthening urban forestry, you will strengthen mitigation. Was very disappointed in the fire department cutting trees in our hillsides and not getting permits until they heard from urban forestry and they realized that they needed to provide mitigation. Then they stopped their practices. Thank you for your time.
Hello again, Rachel Malich with Tree People, a forestry senior manager and also an ISA arborist. Thanks again for letting me share my thoughts on this motion. I've been working for the past 7 years with community members who plant and care for trees in their neighborhood school streets and parks, and it is really disheartening when trees are not pruned on a cycle that's for their best health, or when they see trees really badly pruned, especially in these lower income areas where they're less likely to be able to bang on the doors to say this is wrong, it needs to stop. The main thing I want to point out is that best management practices do take money, and that's what you're hearing from Mr. Gonzalez today, is for enforcement, for ensuring that penalties are given to these contractors that are doing poor work. It takes oversight. It takes them having staff. And so we fully support this motion as well as additional funding for the Urban Forestry Division. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mike Woodward. I'm the CD14 representative CFAC. I'm on the board of Northeast Trees, and maybe more to the point here, I've been a tree trimmer and broken saddle climber for 30 years. And I want to support the anti-hat racking motion that's before you. Tree trimming is a really simple trade. It doesn't take, I can teach all of you how to do this in less than an hour. But hat racking is faster, and it's what's most often done. So I think tree trimming, if you're going to pay for, you don't want to pay for bad tree trimming. So I think that needs to be said. I think that urban forestry needs to be funded in a way that enables them to do the inspections required. If they can't walk out and do management by walking around, you're not going to get the trees to look good. And finally, I think increasing city crews to set an example for the private contractors would really help.
Very good, thank you. Ryan Allen?
Good afternoon. My name is Ryan Allen. I work for the Koreatown Youth and Community Center, which is a tree planting partner with the City of Los Angeles City Plants Program. I'm also an ISA certified arborist, and I as well am the CD10 representative for the Community Forestry Advisory Committee. In 1993, the Community Forestry Advisory was mandated by City Council to make policy recommendations concerning the entire Los Angeles City urban forest, and specifically about tree selection, tree planting, and tree care. As a representative of CFAC, I would like to state that we fully support the motion being proposed by Councilman Bonin to have stronger penalties for contractors not performing tree pruning that meets with the City of Los Angeles street policies, which state that all street tree pruning is in compliance with ISA standards, ANSI standards, and that topping and heading is prohibited. As well, we would definitely like to advocate that the Urban Forest Division needs to have more funding to enforce these policies and ensure that our trees are properly maintained.
Very good, thank you. All right, item 4 was taken on consent, so was 5. And Mr. Koretz, you had comments that you wanted to make on item 6?
Actually, comments and a question for staff.
Very good. If we can have staff come on up. And your comments, Mr. Koretz?
Well, I'm just wondering, and I don't have the technical expertise, so I have no idea whether I'm just spitballing this or whether it might be viable, but in the case that our Save Our Streets initiative that's proposed moves forward, is there a way to expand and use the kind of system that's being contemplated as a central clearinghouse to track not just sewer but street changes, and then to use that so when we're redoing a street we can notify DWP and sanitation and gas company and others and have them come in and do all the work they need to do before the street's fixed or before the sewer changes are made? Can we use this system to add more broad coordination?
I'm Anita Fernandez. I'm with the Bureau of Sanitation, and that's not something we've considered. That would be expanding the system beyond sanitation, but it is something that we could look into.
I wonder if we could just get a report back on that, whether there's some practical way that we can expand that, because it seems like a missed opportunity not to take advantage of those opportunities in that tracking system.
I think Adele
Hoskley with Bureau of Sanitation. Just to give you background, what we have here is a critical component of the sewer infrastructure underground. One, it helped us improve maintenance, and what we have is each of our trucks have a computer on board that has access to the work orders for the work to be done on maintenance. The work orders are tracked from the field anywhere. We know exactly where our crews are working, what work they're doing. But then when they find something is wrong or different about the sewer or something needs to be done, we have an inventory, we have a database of data that managed our sewer system, both in GIS and in data that we have to update to ensure it's up to date. Because our guys, when they go out in the field and cleaning a sewer, they need to know what kind of sewer we have. If it's lined with plastic, they use different tools. If it's not, they have to know. All that information this has saved us huge amount of money. This is an award-winning program that saved the city and increased efficiency, I would say, by doubling our ability to do more work. I think what you bring forward, Councilman, is a issue that all of us as a city need to look at how better we coordinate our efforts and our communication. I know the chair of the committee here always reminds me that we all need to do a better job of coordinating and doing complete streets. You know, when we go in and dig a street, it should be a street that we dig and address all the issues in that one street. If that we can get to that point, I think is great. So we'll come back and give you more update, but I wanted to at least tell you this is very specific to our operation. It's very specific to our database. It does not expand beyond that. It's really used for our operation in maintaining sewers and managing the sewer system to provide a better service to our constituents.
I know your system is very effective, and I'm the least technical person probably in this building. So
I don't question that.
Thank you.
I might believe that.
So I don't know whether there's a way to use your system, which is working very effectively on its specific mission, to expand to do some other things that are also productive, or whether there's something we should create a separate system to do that we're not doing currently.
I think with the increase in work that needs to be done on the streets, I think it needs to be a discussion at a city level on how we better coordinate activities. I agree with you, but I'm not sure if this is the right tool or not, but we can do that and talk to our partners in street service and engineering.
Mr. LaBonge.
I just think important, regionalism is so important when we do our public works, not by council district. So if we do all of everything that's east of the Los Angeles River, everything that's in the Wilshire area, whether it's in the 10th district, whether it's in the 1st district or the 4th district, I think we have to look at regionalism. But something that's interesting, when DWP had the unfortunate rash of water breaks, like about 4 or 5 years ago, they did a study of the pipe. And some of the pipe which was cast at a certain period of time had different values in it, that the oldest parts of the city's pipes didn't break. It was more on the west side that there were breaks, if I recall, west of Western Avenue as opposed to the central. So there's a whole lot of factors. But the tough thing for us to look at is how do you build the new city when it's old? And the new city is the street. And I think that's something to look at for the infrastructure, etc., and how you go forward. I do believe we should look at this in a whole way differently than we ever have before. The worst complaint in the city that I have is when you're on a trail and somebody took their plastic bag and they put their dog poop and they set it on the side of the trail. I don't know why you have a plastic bag to pick up dog poop and you don't take it with you, but they leave it there. That's the first complaint. The second worst complaint is when you don't leave it on the trail there. Good job. Second worst complaint is when you get someone who's in the film industry who complain about a production in their neighborhood, which happens. It just fries me. Do you ever have those calls, Paul?
Always, sadly, very frequently.
Yeah, so the third complaint, though, is they just paved my street last month, and then ZWG or some other agency came along and tore up the street again. So these type of things, I think, the coordination that really is so key. But also now we've got to remember the aqueduct is our baseline for the modern first push of Los Angeles. Some of the systems are 70 years old. They had a water break on Castle and Windsor near Silver Lake yesterday, and the pipe was 70 years old, and it just broke. And so, but the one credit too, maybe Mr. Efficiency, Mr. Galperin would give DWP credit. They run their infrastructure till they drop because you get the greater value. But at the same time, then when it does drop, you have the breakage. But you know that, Mr. Chairman, is what's well and good. Thank you so much.
Mr. Koretz.
Yeah, if I could just make one follow-up comment based on Mr. LaBonge's comments. And interestingly enough, my first week on council, I think we had all those water breaks that Tom was talking about. We had one that was massive on a line that was 100 years old, but we had another one that was very significant where we had the sinkhole where the fire truck dropped into. That was all within a few days. And that was only around 30 or so years old. So I'm wondering if there were different groupings of types of water mains and pipes that we were putting in different eras, and if we're aware or we have a way to become aware of which of the least effective ones there were, and we have the ability to track that and go after replacing those at the earliest times.
As we're talking about this is sewers, and in sewer system, I would say we're very advanced in how we televise sewers and we assess sewers. And really, we've used the data and the information we have to prioritize our sewer basins and sheds in the city on the highest priority. While we have the biggest issues in sewers are blockages versus collapses, and we've done a good job in assessing. So there's a lot of combinations of things. Age is a factor. It's not the cause. Location, if you are in an area in a hillside that has a lot of trees, it could be an issue. There is a period of time of construction material that occurred in the city that has potential. But we've done all that analysis over the last 12 years, and we've prioritized. And by us implementing a systematic way of assessing televising sewers, assessing its needs, and going out and implementing our capital program accordingly that you helped supporting us in doing that, we've reduced spills by 85%. So I think focusing on the critical patients and addressing those have helped us. So we have done very good. And this data and this system is the tool that our staff needs in the field to know what's out there and address and do the right procedure to the pipe in a fast and timely manner, and get the information back to the system so we can analyze it and keep going and become smarter and smarter.
One other thing I'd like to add is that for the new MyLA 311 system, part of the fulfillment process is in our next phase, automating that for field users, and this is one of the systems that we're looking at in perhaps expanding to the MyLA 311 fulfillment side.
Mr. Chair, just for a fact, of the 365 days of the year, what day has the highest and what time highest water use and sanitation use? What day?
Water and sewer?
At the same time?
There's one day.
Super Bowl halftime, right? Halftime at Super Bowl. All right,
of course. Very good. Colleagues, we'll go ahead and approve the proposed Second Amendment to the existing agreement with Gatekeeper Systems to extend the term for an additional 3 years from June 1 through May 31st of 2017 as specified. Without objection, that item is approved. It appears that there are no general comment speaker cards. Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.